What the hell are you doing here? Get your ghetto ass back to wherever you crawled out from before I call security to drag you out. The vicious words poured from Reginald Whitmore's mouth like poison. The billionaire's eyes burned with pure hatred as he towered over Amara Johnson. You don't belong with civilized people. Know your damn place, he roared. Without warning, Whitmore's hands shot out and violently shoved Amara backward. Her body flew through the air before crashing into the pool with explosive force. Water erupted everywhere. Amara disappeared beneath the surface, her designer gown floating around her like a broken dream. When she surfaced, gasping and choking, mascara streamed down her face in black rivers. Whitmore adjusted his tuxedo, smirking with satisfaction. Around him, shocked guests held up phones, recording every second of the billionaire's racist assault. But what Reginald Whitmore didn't know was that the woman he just humiliated held the power to destroy his entire empire. And in exactly 23 minutes, his billion-dollar world would come crashing down. 3 days earlier, David Johnson sat in his glass-walled office overlooking downtown Atlanta's skyline. The morning sun cast long shadows across his mahogany desk where contracts worth millions waited for his signature. At 38, he had built TechFlow Industries from nothing into the most innovative software company in the Southeast. His fingers traced the edge of a particular document that made his pulse quicken. The header read, Whitmore Corporation Strategic Partnership Proposal, $1.20 billion. It was the deal that would catapult his company into the global arena. David's revolutionary artificial intelligence platform had caught the attention of every major corporation in America. But Reginald Whitmore had been the most aggressive suitor, flying down from New York twice in the past month with increasingly generous offers. "Baby, you're going to be late for lunch," came a warm voice from the doorway. Amara Johnson glided into the office wearing a tailored navy suit that accentuated her elegant frame. Her law degree from Harvard hung prominently on the wall behind David's desk, a reminder of the power couple they had become. As a partner at Morrison & Associates, she specialized in corporate law and had built her own impressive client base. "Just reviewing Whitmore's final proposal," David said, pulling her close. "He's desperate for our AI technology. His real estate empire is hemorrhaging money after the market crash. Without our predictive analytics software, his company will be bankrupt within 6 months." Amara studied the contract with her trained legal eye. The numbers were staggering. Whitmore was offering nearly double what their technology was worth on the open market. "He needs us more than we need him," she observed. "That puts you in the driver's seat." David nodded. Whitmore Corporation owned 40% of Atlanta's commercial real estate, but their outdated business model was failing catastrophically. They desperately needed David's AI platform to predict market trends and optimize their investments. "I'm meeting him tonight at the charity gala," David said. "He's hosting it at the Fairmont Grand Hotel. I want to finalize everything in person." The Children's Education Foundation Gala was Atlanta's most exclusive social event. Tickets cost $50,000 per person, and the guest list read like a who's who of Southern aristocracy. Whitmore used the annual event to network with politicians and intimidate business rivals. "I still don't trust him," Amara said, her instincts as a prosecutor making her cautious. His background check revealed some concerning patterns. Discrimination lawsuits that were quietly settled, minority-owned businesses that mysteriously lost contracts after dealing with him. David understood her concerns. During their negotiations, he had sensed something beneath Whitmore's polished exterior. The billionaire was always courteous in person, but David caught subtle signs of discomfort when discussing partnership details. Whitmore's handshake was always brief, his eye contact minimal. "He needs this deal to survive," David replied. "Personal prejudices become irrelevant when bankruptcy is the alternative." Meanwhile, across town in his marble-columned mansion, Reginald Whitmore paced his study like a caged animal. Financial reports covered his antique desk, each one painting a grimmer picture than the last. His family's real estate empire, built over 3 generations, was crumbling. The 2023 market crash had devastated his portfolio. Property values plummeted while construction costs soared. His company owed $700 million to creditors with payments due within 90 days. Without David's AI technology to guide strategic decisions, Whitmore Corporation would face liquidation. "Sir, the Johnson contract is ready for tonight," his assistant Margaret said nervously from the doorway. Whitmore's jaw clenched. The idea of depending on a black entrepreneur for salvation made his stomach turn. His grandfather had built this empire on the principle that certain people belonged in certain places. Now he was being forced to prostrate himself before someone he considered beneath his social class. "Make sure everything is perfect at the gala," he growled. "I need this deal signed tonight." Margaret nodded and retreated. She had worked for Whitmore for 15 years and recognized the dangerous edge in his voice. When his prejudices collided with his desperation, unpredictable things happened. That evening, David adjusted his black tuxedo in the bedroom mirror while Amara fastened her diamond earrings. Her midnight blue gown hugged her curves elegantly, and her natural beauty needed minimal makeup to radiate confidence. "Ready to make history?" she asked, taking his arm. David smiled, unaware that in 3 hours his wife would be fighting for her dignity in a hotel pool while his billion-dollar deal hung in the balance. The Fairmont Grand Hotel sparkled like a jewel against Atlanta's skyline. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms guided luxury vehicles under the marble archway, while photographers captured arriving guests. The charity gala represented the pinnacle of Southern high society, where million-dollar donations were discussed as casually as weekend plans. David and Amara stepped out of their black Tesla, immediately drawing attention from the crowd. Several guests whispered behind gloved hands, their conversations peppered with curiosity and barely concealed judgment. Some recognized David from business magazines, while others simply noticed the confident way the couple carried themselves. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, welcome," greeted the hotel manager with genuine warmth. His staff had been briefed about the evening's VIP guests. "Mr. Whitmore has been asking about your arrival every 10 minutes. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across walls lined with original oil paintings worth more than most people's homes. The scent of white orchids and expensive perfume filled the air, while a string quartet played classical melodies from a raised platform overlooking the crowd. Reginald Whitmore held court near the mahogany bar, surrounded by his usual circle of wealthy sycophants. Judge Harold Morrison, a man whose courtroom decisions had shaped Atlanta's legal landscape for decades, stood beside Senator Patricia Blake, whose family had controlled Georgia politics since Reconstruction. Bank President Charles Mitchell completed the trio, his financial institution holding mortgages on half the city's commercial properties. These weren't just Whitmore's friends, they were his insurance policy. Their combined influence could make or break careers, destroy reputations, and reshape entire industries with a few strategic phone calls. "There's our golden goose," Whitmore muttered to his companion, spotting David across the room. His knuckles whitened around his champagne flute. Time to close this deal before he gets any more uppity ideas. He approached the couple with practiced charm, his public mask firmly in place. Years of high society events had taught him to hide his true feelings behind layers of Southern gentleman facade. "David, Amara! So wonderful you could make it tonight," he gushed, his voice carrying just enough volume to let nearby guests overhear his apparent friendship with the couple. Whitmore's handshake with David lingered longer than usual, his desperation barely contained beneath his polished exterior. Sweat beaded along his hairline despite the ballroom's perfect climate control. "I hope you've had time to review our final proposal thoroughly," he said, his smile never wavering despite the urgency in his voice. "Very generous terms," David replied diplomatically, maintaining professional distance, "though I'm still evaluating all available options in the marketplace." Whitmore's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, a muscle in his jaw twitching with suppressed anxiety. Of course, but surely you understand the mutual benefits. My distribution network spans 47 countries. We could make your technology available globally within 18 months, maybe less." What Whitmore didn't mention was that 3 other tech companies had already rejected similar partnerships after researching his business practices. David's AI platform represented his last hope for survival, the only lifeline that could pull Whitmore Corporation back from the brink of financial ruin. "The global reach is certainly attractive," David acknowledged, though his tone remained noncommittal. "However, I want to ensure any partnership aligns with our company values and long-term strategic goals. Whitmore felt his desperation spike. Every minute of delay brought him closer to bankruptcy. His creditors were already circling like vultures, and his board of directors had scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss liquidation options. "Darling, I'm going to get some air," Amara interjected, sensing the mounting tension between the two men. Her legal instincts warned her that Whitmore's forced pleasantries masked something darker underneath. "The terrace by the pool looks absolutely lovely tonight." She glided away in her flowing midnight blue gown, her movement graceful and confident. Several male guests followed her with their eyes, though their wives quickly redirected their attention with sharp elbows and pointed glares. Whitmore watched her leave with an expression David couldn't quite read, a mixture of resentment and something more sinister that made David's protective instincts flare. "Beautiful wife you have there," Whitmore commented, his voice carrying an undertone that made David's shoulders tense. "Though I imagine the corporate world can be particularly challenging for people like her." David's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Amara graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law School. She's more qualified than most people in this room, including several sitting at your board of directors." "Oh, absolutely, absolutely!" Whitmore backpedaled quickly, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I simply meant that certain social circles can be rather traditional in their perspectives. Old families, established customs, you understand." The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, but David caught the poisonous subtext. Whitmore was testing boundaries, probing to see how much casual racism he could inject into their conversation. "I think Amara handles herself quite well in any social circle," David replied coldly. "Perhaps the question isn't whether she belongs, but whether certain attitudes belong in modern society." Whitmore's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of naked hostility before snapping back into place. "You're absolutely right, of course. Please excuse me while I check on the evening's arrangements." Outside on the terrace, Amara breathed in the cool evening air, grateful for the respite from the ballroom's political undercurrents. The infinity pool reflected the hotel's lights like a mirror, creating an almost magical atmosphere that reminded her why she had fallen in love with Atlanta's beauty, despite its complicated history. She pulled out her phone to check messages from her law firm, where 3 junior associates were working late on a discrimination case that bore unsettling similarities to patterns she had researched about Whitmore Corporation. Back inside, Whitmore excused himself from David and made his way to the bar where his inner circle waited like conspirators planning a coup. The champagne had been flowing freely for over an hour, and their conversations grew increasingly unguarded as alcohol dissolved their public restraint. "Desperate times call for desperate measures," Judge Morrison observed, swirling his bourbon with practiced movements. "Though I never thought I'd see the day when Reginald Whitmore needed financial salvation from their kind." "The natural order is changing too quickly," Senator Blake added with obvious distaste, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "These people think they can simply buy their way into our circles, our clubs, our neighborhoods. They don't understand the traditions that built this city." Whitmore drained his 3rd glass of champagne in 20 minutes, feeling the alcohol burn away his careful restraint like acid eating through metal. "Sometimes I wonder if my grandfather's generation had the right approach to keeping things properly ordered." Bank President Mitchell chuckled darkly, his laughter carrying an ugly undertone that would have chilled anyone overhearing their conversation. "Well, there are still ways to remind certain people of their proper place in the social hierarchy." The group's shared laughter sounded like wolves preparing to hunt. Their perceived superiority and financial influence made them careless with their words, forgetting that hotel staff moved silently around them, serving drinks and clearing tables while absorbing every poisonous syllable. "Gentlemen, let's get some fresh air," Whitmore suggested, his voice slightly slurred from alcohol and mounting rage. "I need to clear my head before finalizing this distasteful business arrangement." The 4 men made their way toward the terrace, their footsteps unsteady from champagne and arrogance. Through the glass doors they could see Amara standing alone by the pool, her silhouette elegant against the shimmering water, completely unaware of the approaching storm. "Look at that," Judge Morrison sneered as the four men stepped onto the terrace, his voice dripping with contempt. Acting like she owns the damn place. Probably never seen a pool this nice where she comes from, Senator Blake added with vicious glee, her usual political composure completely abandoned. I bet she's wondering if she can take a swim without getting arrested for trespassing. Whitmore's vision tunneled as he focused on Amara's lone figure by the pool. All his frustrations, the mounting debts, the failed investments, the humiliation of needing David's help, crystallized into burning resentment. Here was everything wrong with his changing world. A black woman in designer clothes, standing confidently in his domain, married to the man who held his financial future hostage. "Watch this, gentlemen," he muttered to his companions, straightening his bow tie like a soldier preparing for battle. "Time to restore some natural order to this evening." The alcohol had transformed Whitmore from a desperate businessman into something far more dangerous. A cornered predator with nothing left to lose and a lifetime of racial prejudice to fuel his rage. Amara turned as she heard multiple footsteps approaching across the marble terrace. Four men in expensive tuxedos walked toward her with predatory confidence, their faces flushed with alcohol and malicious intent. Her prosecutor instincts immediately recognized the pack mentality, the way they had positioned themselves to block her escape routes. "Excuse me, miss," Whitmore called out, his voice carrying across the terrace with false politeness that fooled no one. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Amara smiled politely despite the warning bells in her head. "I'm Amara Johnson. My husband David and I are guests here tonight supporting the Children's Education Foundation." "Johnson," Whitmore repeated slowly, as if the name tasted bitter on his tongue. He stepped closer, invading her personal space with deliberate aggression. "And what exactly qualifies someone like you to attend an event of this caliber?" The question hit like a slap across the face. Amara's legal training kicked in, keeping her voice level despite the obvious provocation and the way these men were slowly surrounding her, like wolves circling wounded prey. "We're here for the same reason as everyone else, to support a worthy cause and contribute to our community." "Contribute?" Bank President Mitchell laughed harshly, the sound echoing off the hotel walls. "What exactly have your people ever contributed besides crime statistics and welfare dependency?" "That's enough," Amara said firmly, her prosecutor voice cutting through their drunken hostility. "I think you gentlemen have had far too much to drink. I'm going to rejoin my husband now." But as she moved toward the door, Whitmore stepped sideways, deliberately blocking her path. His companions spread out slightly, forming a loose semicircle that trapped her near the pool's edge like hunters cornering their quarry. "Not so fast, sweetheart," Whitmore said with a predatory grin that revealed his true nature. "I think it's time someone explained the rules to you. See, there's a certain order to things in this city, traditions that go back generations." "Mr. Whitmore," Amara said, her voice deadly calm despite her racing heart, "I strongly suggest you step aside before you say something you'll deeply regret." "Regret?" Senator Blake laughed shrilly. "The only regret here is letting your kind think you belong in civilized society. You're nothing but affirmative action trash dressed up in stolen clothes." Amara's eyes blazed with controlled fury, but she maintained her composure. 20 years of facing down hostile judges, racist prosecutors, and corrupt officials had taught her never to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Ladies and gentlemen record everything these days," she said pointedly, nodding toward the ballroom where several guests had noticed the confrontation and were discreetly filming through the glass doors. "Let them record," Whitmore snarled, his mask of civility completely shattered. The alcohol and his companion's encouragement had unleashed decades of suppressed hatred. "Maybe it's time people saw what happens when you forget your place." Judge Morrison stepped closer, his breath reeking of bourbon and malice. "You think because you married some tech monkey you can waltz into our world? This isn't your neighborhood community center, girl. This is where real families build real legacies." "Your husband might have money," Senator Blake added viciously, "but money can't buy breeding. It can't wash away what you really are underneath all that designer fabric." Amara felt her back nearly touching the pool's edge as they pressed closer. The water lapped gently behind her, its peaceful sound a stark contrast to the ugly hatred spewing from these supposedly distinguished pillars of society. You want to know what your problem is? Whitmore continued, his voice rising with each word. You actually believe you're equal to us. You think those degrees and that expensive dress make you our peer. But we see right through the costume to the ghetto trash underneath. Inside the ballroom, David finished his conversation with the hotel manager about donation procedures and looked around for Amara. Through the glass terrace doors, he could see a crowd gathered near the pool, but the angle prevented him from identifying the people involved. "Mr. Johnson," called a waiter carrying a silver tray. "Your wife asked me to tell you she's getting some air on the terrace." David nodded and began making his way through the crowd, stopping occasionally to shake hands with business acquaintances who wanted to congratulate him on his company's recent successes. Outside, the confrontation reached a boiling point as Whitmore's hatred finally overwhelmed any remaining restraint. "You know what really pisses me off?" he roared, pointing an accusing finger inches from Amara's face. "People like you coming into our spaces, taking our opportunities, and then having the fucking audacity to act like you earned it through merit instead of racial quotas and white guilt. Your husband thinks he's so smart with his little computer program," Judge Morrison added with a sneer. "But we know the truth. The only reason he got those government contracts is because some bleeding-heart liberals needed to fill their diversity requirements. And now you parade around here like you're something special," Senator Blake spat. "Like you're not just another welfare queen who got lucky enough to marry above her station." Amara's hands trembled with rage, but she kept her voice steady. "You're making a serious mistake, gentlemen. My husband's technology could save Mr. Whitmore's company from bankruptcy. Do you really want to jeopardize that over your personal prejudices?" "Bankruptcy," Whitmore laughed maniacally. "You think I'd rather go broke than deal with your kind? Maybe bankruptcy is preferable to selling my soul to ghetto scum who should be grateful we even acknowledge their existence." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Around them, hotel guests pressed closer to the glass doors, their phones recording every venomous syllable. Social media notifications were already pinging as the first videos uploaded to Instagram and Twitter. "You want to know what I really think?" Whitmore continued, his voice reaching a crescendo of hatred. "I think you and your monkey husband should crawl back to whatever crack-infested housing project spawned you before real Americans decide to put you back where you belong." He stepped forward aggressively, his face twisted with pure malice. "This isn't your world, bitch. It never was and never will be. You're just a temporary inconvenience that needs to be reminded of reality." Amara realized with crystal clarity that these men had moved beyond verbal assault into genuinely dangerous territory. Their pack mentality, fueled by alcohol and years of unchallenged privilege, had created a perfect storm of racist violence. "Mr. Whitmore," she said with the authority of someone who had faced down killers in courtrooms, "you have exactly 10 seconds to step aside before I start screaming for security." "Security?" He laughed wildly. "Sweetheart, I own the security in this place. I own the police in this city. I own judges, senators, and bank presidents. Who exactly do you think is going to help a little ghetto princess against Atlanta's most powerful families?" That's when Whitmore made his fatal mistake. Consumed by rage and emboldened by his companion's encouragement, he grabbed Amara by the shoulders and prepared to teach her what he considered a much-needed lesson about knowing her place in his carefully ordered world. Neither he nor his accomplices noticed David Johnson pushing through the terrace doors, his face a mask of controlled fury as he witnessed the assault on his wife. The next 60 seconds would destroy Whitmore's empire and change 4 lives forever. "What the hell are you doing here? This isn't some food stamp charity dinner. Get your ghetto ass back to wherever you crawled out from before I call security to drag you out." The vicious words exploded from Whitmore's mouth as his hands grabbed Amara's shoulders with violent force. His face contorted with pure hatred as decades of suppressed racism finally erupted. "You don't belong with civilized people. Know your damn place, you worthless piece of trash!" Without warning, Whitmore's manicured hands shoved Amara backward with all his strength. Her body flew through the air, designer gown flowing like broken wings, before crashing into the pool with explosive force. Water erupted everywhere as Amara disappeared beneath the surface. When she emerged, gasping and choking, mascara streamed down her face in black rivers, while her elegant dress clung to her body like a shroud. Whitmore stood at the pool's edge, adjusting his tuxedo with savage satisfaction. Maybe now you'll remember where you belong. He sneered at the crowd of shocked guests, recording everything on their phones. That's when David Johnson burst through the terrace doors like an avenging angel. "Get away from my wife!" The roar silenced the entire terrace. David's voice carried the authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing, and every person present felt the power radiating from his fury. Whitmore spun around, his face draining of color as he saw David charging toward him. For the first time that evening, genuine fear flickered in the billionaire's eyes. "David, this is just a misunderstanding," Whitmore stammered, suddenly realizing the magnitude of his mistake. "I had too much to drink. I didn't mean—" "You pushed my wife into a pool and called her trash." David's voice cut through Whitmore's pathetic excuses like a blade. "In front of everyone. You think money gives you the right to assault my family?" David helped Amara out of the water, his gentle touch contrasting sharply with the murderous rage in his eyes. Hotel staff rushed forward with towels while guests continued filming the billionaire's public meltdown. "Please, David, we can work this out," Whitmore begged, his desperation now visible to everyone. "Our deal, our partnership, we need each other. Don't let emotion destroy a beneficial business relationship." David's laugh was cold enough to freeze blood. "Business relationship? You just destroyed any possibility of that when you showed your true character." "But you need my distribution network," Whitmore pleaded. "My connections, my resources. Think about your company's future." "My company's future." David's voice dropped to a deadly whisper that somehow carried across the silent terrace. "Reginald, you pathetic fool, you have no idea what you've just done." Whitmore's face crumpled as the implications began sinking in. Without David's AI technology, his company would collapse within months. The board meeting scheduled for Monday would become a liquidation hearing. "I'll pay double," he offered frantically. "Triple the original amount. Name your price, anything you want." "There isn't enough money in your failing empire to undo what you just did," David replied with ice-cold finality. Senator Blake tried to intervene, her political instincts kicking in. "Gentlemen, surely we can resolve this misunderstanding privately. No need for hasty decisions that could harm everyone involved." "Misunderstanding?" Amara spoke for the first time since emerging from the pool, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had prosecuted criminals far more dangerous than these cowards. "There's no misunderstanding about racist assault captured on dozens of phones." Judge Morrison attempted damage control. "Now see here, this has gotten out of hand. Perhaps if we all just calm down—" "Calm down?" David's voice rose again. "You stood there and watched a billionaire assault my wife while spouting racial slurs, and you want us to calm down?" Whitmore dropped to his knees on the marble terrace, his dignity evaporating like morning mist. "David, please. My company employs 3,000 people. My family has built this empire over generations. Don't destroy everything over one moment of poor judgment." "Poor judgment?" David stared down at the groveling billionaire with contempt. "You showed me exactly who you are, Reginald, and now you'll live with the consequences." "The deal is terminated," David announced to the crowd. "Permanently. TechFlow Industries will never do business with Whitmore Corporation or any of his associates." Gasps echoed across the terrace as the financial implications hit the assembled guests. Whitmore Corporation's stock would plummet when news broke. Creditors would panic. The empire would crumble. "You can't do this," Whitmore screamed, his composure completely shattered. "I'll sue you for breach of contract. I'll destroy your reputation." "With what lawyers?" David asked mockingly. "With what money? Your company will be bankrupt before you can file paperwork." Whitmore's face turned purple with rage and desperation. "This is blackmail! You're using one mistake to steal everything my family built." "I'm not stealing anything," David replied coldly. "I'm simply choosing not to save you from your own racism. There's a difference." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Atlanta's most powerful businessman begged for mercy from the man he had just tried to humiliate. Phone cameras captured every moment of Whitmore's complete destruction. "My grandfather would roll over in his grave," Whitmore wailed. "Everything we built, everything we worked for, gone because of one moment." "Your grandfather would be proud," Amara said quietly, her words cutting deeper than any scream. "You're exactly the man he raised you to be." As hotel security finally arrived to escort the disgraced billionaire away, Whitmore's empire began crumbling in real time around him. Hotel security surrounded Whitmore like a SWAT team responding to a terrorist threat. Their black uniforms contrasted sharply with his expensive tuxedo as they formed a protective barrier between him and the shocked guests. "Mr. Whitmore, you need to leave the premises immediately," announced Head of Security Marcus Williams, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had handled Atlanta's elite for 15 years. "The hotel is revoking your access permanently." "You can't throw me out!" Whitmore shrieked, his voice cracking like a teenager. "I've hosted this gala for 12 years. My family donated $2 million to build this ballroom." "Sir, you assaulted a guest," Williams replied firmly. "We have dozens of witnesses and video evidence. Leave voluntarily or we'll have Atlanta police escort you out in handcuffs." Around the terrace, guests pulled out phones with the speed of paparazzi spotting celebrities. The assault video was already uploaded to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook simultaneously. Notification alerts pinged constantly as shares and comments multiplied exponentially. Judge Morrison and Senator Blake suddenly discovered urgent phone calls requiring their immediate attention. Bank President Mitchell developed a sudden case of amnesia, claiming he had been inside during the entire incident. Whitmore's inner circle abandoned him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. "Harold, Patricia, Charles," Whitmore called desperately to his former allies. "Tell them this was just a misunderstanding. You were here. You saw everything." But his accomplices had already melted into the crowd, leaving Whitmore to face the consequences alone. Their political survival instincts kicked in faster than their loyalty to old friendships. Inside the ballroom, news of the assault spread through the crowd like wildfire. Business partners who had been courting Whitmore's favor suddenly found other conversations more pressing. His table at the charity auction sat completely empty, a monument to his instant social exile. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hotel manager announced over the sound system, "we sincerely apologize for tonight's disruption. The Fairmont Grand Hotel maintains zero tolerance for discrimination and assault." On social media, the hashtag #Poolgate began trending within 20 minutes. The video had already been viewed 500,000 times across platforms. News outlets started picking up the story as notifications flooded newsroom assignment desks. CNN breaking news, billionaire assaults woman at charity gala, Fox News alert, Atlanta business leader under fire for racist attack, MSNBC, viral video shows shocking display of racism at elite event. David's phone buzzed constantly with calls from business reporters, civil rights organizations, and lawyers offering to represent them. He ignored them all, focusing entirely on Amara's well-being while hotel staff provided dry clothes and medical attention. "Mr. Johnson," approached Dr. Sarah Carter, the hotel's on-call physician. "I've examined your wife. No physical injuries, but I recommend monitoring for shock and emotional trauma." Whitmore's business empire began collapsing in real time as news spread through Atlanta's interconnected corporate network. His assistant Margaret fielded panicked calls from board members, investors, and creditors who had seen the videos online. "Mr. Whitmore's phone has been ringing non-stop," she reported to hotel security. "3 board members have called emergency meetings. 2 major investors want immediate conference calls. The bank is demanding to speak with him about loan covenant violations." Whitmore Corporation's stock price plummeted 18% in after-hours trading as algorithmic trading systems responded to negative sentiment analysis of social media posts. Financial analysts began downgrading the company's credit rating based solely on the reputational damage. "This changes everything," observed Financial Times reporter James Crawford, who had been covering the gala for a society piece. "No major corporation will want association with this kind of publicity. Whitmore's business relationships are toxified overnight." Back on the terrace, Whitmore made one final desperate attempt at damage control. "David, please, think about the 3,000 families who depend on my company for their livelihoods. Don't let your anger destroy innocent people's jobs." "You should have thought about that before you assaulted my wife," David replied coldly. "Actions have consequences, Reginald. Tonight you learned that money can't protect you from accountability." Hotel management presented Whitmore with a lifetime ban letter, formally barring him from all Fairmont properties worldwide. The document would become part of his permanent record, ensuring his social exile extended beyond Atlanta's borders. As security escorted him toward the exit, Whitmore's phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Saw the video. The kids and I are staying at my mother's house. Don't come home tonight. Even his family was abandoning him before he reached the parking garage. This isn't over, he screamed over his shoulder as security pushed him through the hotel's service entrance. You'll regret crossing the Whitmore family. But his threats rang hollow. Everyone present understood they were witnessing the complete destruction of a man who had confused wealth with worth, power with respect. The videos would ensure his racist assault lived forever in digital infamy. By midnight, Reginald Whitmore had transformed from Atlanta's most feared businessman into social media's most hated villain. By 6 a.m. the next morning, the pool assault video had exploded across every major news platform in America. CNN ran it as their lead story. Fox News dissected it frame by frame. MSNBC invited civil rights leaders for panel discussions. The hashtag #Poolgate had 2.3 million mentions and climbing. This is Anderson Cooper 360. Tonight, we examine how one moment of racist violence destroyed a billion-dollar empire in real time, announced the silver-haired anchor as the assault video played for the millionth time. Whitmore Corporation's headquarters resembled a war zone. Protesters filled the sidewalks carrying signs reading, "Racism has consequences," and "Justice for Amara." News vans lined the street while reporters ambushed employees entering the building. Inside the marble-walled boardroom, emergency meetings raged as board members tried salvaging what remained of their reputations. Stock prices had crashed 47% in overnight trading. Major clients were terminating contracts via email to avoid phone conversations. Reginald's actions have made our company radioactive, declared board chairman William Stevens, his voice heavy with 40 years of corporate experience. Nike pulled their advertising account. Delta canceled our property management contracts. Even our law firm is distancing themselves. Margaret, Whitmore's longtime assistant, fielded resignation calls from senior executives fleeing the sinking ship. 3 VPs have already submitted letters. Our head of public relations quit via text message. She said her career couldn't survive association with this scandal. Meanwhile, federal investigators had taken notice of the viral video and its implications. FBI agent Maria Santos reviewed Whitmore Corporation's files, while civil rights attorneys lined up to represent Amara in what promised to be the most publicized discrimination case in Georgia history. The video evidence is overwhelming, Santos explained to her supervisor, but our background investigation revealed a pattern spanning 20 years. Discriminatory hiring practices, minority contractors mysteriously losing bids, housing developments that somehow never approved black buyers. The Department of Justice opened a formal civil rights investigation within 72 hours. Federal subpoenas arrived at Whitmore Corporation demanding employment records, contractor lists, and internal communications dating back to 2005. Whitmore himself had become a prisoner in his Buckhead mansion, surrounded by protesters and media crews camping outside his iron gates. His wife, Jennifer, had taken their children to her mother's estate in Charleston, refusing his desperate phone calls. I can't show my face at the country club, Jennifer told her mother during a tearful conversation. Caroline's tennis team kicked her off because other parents don't want their children associated with our family name. Former business partners rushed to publicly condemn Whitmore's actions, desperate to protect their own reputations. Real estate mogul Thomas Richmond issued a statement. The behavior displayed in that video represents everything antithetical to modern business values. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Margaret, his loyal assistant for 15 years, had been secretly recording conversations for months after witnessing increasingly racist behavior. She contacted the FBI with a treasure trove of audio evidence. He used racial slurs regularly when discussing contracts with minority-owned businesses, Margaret testified to federal investigators. I have recordings of him instructing lawyers to find legal ways to exclude black contractors from bidding processes. The audio recordings leaked to major news networks, providing damning context for the pool assault. Whitmore's voice could be heard clearly discussing keeping those people in their place and maintaining neighborhood standards through discriminatory practices. 3 months later, the civil trial began in Fulton County Superior Court. Media attention rivaled high-profile celebrity cases as protesters filled the courthouse steps. Amara, represented by Atlanta's most prestigious civil rights firm, sat composed at the plaintiff's table while cameras captured every moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," began attorney Michelle Roberts during opening statements, "this case represents more than one moment of violence. It exposes decades of systematic racism disguised as business practices." The defense team, led by expensive white attorneys from New York, attempted portraying Whitmore as a reformed man who had learned from his mistakes, but the evidence buried their arguments. Video testimony from former employees revealed a corporate culture of casual racism. Contractor James Washington described losing a $50 million project after Whitmore discovered his minority-owned status. Housing developer Patricia Lee documented suspicious permit delays that only affected black-owned developments. Mr. Whitmore's company employed 3,000 people, testified former HR Director Linda Martinez. Only 12 were black, and most worked in janitorial or cafeteria positions despite qualified applicants for management roles. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. Their verdict sent shockwaves through Atlanta's business community. $15 million in compensatory damages, plus $50 million in punitive damages designed to send a message that racism would no longer be tolerated in corporate America. Judge Patricia Reynolds, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years of experience, delivered a scathing rebuke during sentencing. "Mr. Whitmore, your actions represent the worst aspects of American business culture. You used wealth and influence to perpetuate racial discrimination while hiding behind charitable donations and social respectability. The court finds your behavior not only morally reprehensible but economically destructive to our community's growth and prosperity," she continued. "This judgment reflects society's rejection of the racist attitudes you represent." Whitmore Corporation filed for bankruptcy protection within weeks of the verdict. The company's assets were liquidated to pay legal settlements and creditor debts. 3,000 employees lost their jobs as the empire collapsed completely. Federal prosecutors filed additional charges for housing discrimination and civil rights violations. Whitmore faced potential prison time as multiple investigations uncovered decades of systematic racism disguised as legitimate business practices. "The Whitmore case has become a watershed moment," explained legal analyst Rebecca Carter on CNN. "It demonstrates how modern technology and social media can expose racism that previously hid behind closed doors in corporate boardrooms." Other corporations scrambled to review their own practices, terrified of similar exposure. Diversity training programs expanded nationwide as businesses realized the financial consequences of discriminatory behavior in the viral video age. David Johnson's company, meanwhile, experienced unprecedented growth. Major corporations competed for partnerships with Tech Flow Industries, eager to associate with the moral courage he had displayed. The company's valuation tripled within 6 months. "We've received partnership offers from every Fortune 500 company," David told Bloomberg News, "but we're carefully vetting potential partners to ensure alignment with our values of equality and respect." Amara used her settlement money to establish the Equal Justice Technology Foundation, providing legal resources for discrimination victims. Her organization quickly became the most effective civil rights advocacy group in the Southeast. The pool assault video, now studied in business schools as a case study in corporate reputation management, served as a permanent reminder that racism carries devastating consequences in modern America. Whitmore's name became synonymous with the phrase "going viral for the wrong reasons," ensuring his racist legacy would be remembered long after his business empire crumbled into dust. 5 years after the pool assault that destroyed an empire, Atlanta's skyline had transformed dramatically. The gleaming Tech Flow Industries tower dominated the downtown district, its 40-story glass facade reflecting the city's progressive evolution under new leadership. David Johnson stood in his corner office on the top floor, gazing out at the bustling metropolis below. His company now employed over 15,000 people across 12 countries, making him one of the youngest billionaires in American history. The AI technology that Whitmore had desperately needed was now revolutionizing industries worldwide. "The quarterly diversity report shows we're leading the tech sector in minority representation," announced Chief Operating Officer Patricia Washington, a brilliant black engineer who had joined Google specifically because of TechFlow's inclusive culture. David smiled, remembering the scared young programmer he had been just 5 years earlier. Excellence comes from embracing talent regardless of background. Whitmore never understood that principle, and it cost him everything. Across town, Amara adjusted her judicial robes in the chambers of the federal district court. At 47, she had become the youngest black female federal judge in Georgia history, nominated by the president himself after her civil rights advocacy gained national recognition. Her Equal Justice Technology Foundation had filed over 200 successful discrimination lawsuits, recovering $300 million for victims while forcing systematic changes in corporate hiring practices. The foundation's annual gala raised more money than Whitmore's charity event ever had, proving that genuine inclusion generated greater community support than exclusive elitism. Your Honor, the Whitmore v. State of Georgia case is ready for review, announced her clerk, carrying a thick legal brief. Amara nodded grimly. Even from federal prison, Reginald Whitmore continued filing frivolous appeals, desperately attempting to overturn his conviction for civil rights violations. Each motion was denied with increasing judicial impatience. The former billionaire had aged rapidly during his 3-year federal sentence. His hair turned completely gray, his expensive suits replaced by orange jumpsuits, his marble mansions sold to pay legal fees and victim settlements. Prison guards reported that other inmates mocked him constantly, calling him pool boy in reference to his viral infamy. Inmate Whitmore has been denied parole again, reported Corrections Officer Samuel Brown, a black man who took particular satisfaction in delivering the news. His racist statements during psychological evaluations convinced the board he poses continued danger to community safety. Whitmore's family had completely disowned him. His wife divorced him while he awaited trial, taking custody of their children and reverting to her maiden name. His son changed his own name legally to avoid association with the Whitmore legacy. The mansion that once hosted Atlanta's elite now served as a community center for underprivileged youth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that black and Latino children now played basketball where Whitmore had once entertained racist politicians and discriminatory business leaders. Margaret, his former assistant, had written a best-selling memoir titled Behind Closed Doors, Working for a Racist Billionaire. The book's proceeds funded scholarships for minority students pursuing law degrees, ensuring Whitmore's legacy contributed to the very equality he had fought against. Mr. Whitmore thought wealth and connections made him untouchable, Margaret wrote in the book's conclusion. But one moment of authentic character revealed his true nature to the world. No amount of money can protect you from the consequences of hatred. The pool at the Fairmont Grand Hotel had been renamed the Amara Johnson Reflection Pool in honor of her courage and dignity during the assault. A bronze plaque commemorated the moment when social media justice conquered old money racism. Tourism to the hotel increased dramatically as visitors wanted to see the exact location where a viral video changed American business culture. The pool had become an unlikely pilgrimage site for civil rights supporters. Standing together on their penthouse balcony overlooking the city they had helped transform, David and Amara reflected on the journey from that horrible night to their current success. "That monster thought he could humiliate me into silence," Amara said, her voice filled with quiet strength. "Instead, he revealed his true character to the world and destroyed himself in the process." "Real change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal," David added, pulling his wife close. "When we stand up, speak out, and demand better from our communities and institutions." The couple's story had become required reading in business schools, law schools, and civil rights organizations nationwide. Their example proved that dignity and principle could triumph over wealth and privilege when supported by modern technology and social media accountability. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that justice eventually prevails. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of race. Subscribe for more stories where bullies face real consequences for their actions. Tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed racism in your workplace or community? What would you do if you saw someone being treated like Amara? Your voice matters in the fight for equality. Remember, treat others as you want to be treated. Character matters more than wealth. See you in the next story where justice wins.
The heart monitor was screaming. It was a frantic, desperate sound barely audible over the howl of the wind and rain beating against the hospital windows. Nurse Seraphiel Jenkins gripped the dying woman's hand, her own knuckles white. The woman, a Jane Doe, found on the side of the road, was fading fast. She had just given birth. "You have a son," Seraphiel whispered, her voice thick. "A beautiful baby boy. What's his name?" The woman's lips pale and cracked parted. A single ragged breath. A whisper. "Orion," she breathed, and was gone. Moments later, the baby's frantic father handed Seraphiel his ID for the paperwork. Seraphiel's eyes scanned the plastic card, and all the air left her lungs. A gasp, sharp and horrified, echoed in the silent room. The name on the ID wasn't just a name, it was a curse. The night wasn't just dark, it was oppressive. A thick, wet blanket of a storm had descended on the city, turning streets into raging rivers and the sky into a percussion instrument. At St. Jude's Hospital, the emergency room was a special kind of chaotic symphony. Every bed was full, every nurse running on fumes and caffeine. Seraphiel Jenkins was the charge nurse on the maternity ward, but tonight she was floating, pulled down to the ER to help with the overflow. At 42, Seraphiel was the bedrock of the ward. She had a calm, steady presence that could soothe a panicking first-time mother or command a chaotic delivery room. But beneath that polished exterior, Seraphiel was haunted. It was a quiet, haunting one that lived in the lines around her eyes and the way she'd flinch at the sound of screeching tires, even on a TV show. The ambulance doors burst open, spraying rainwater and paramedics onto the slick linoleum. "Jane Doe, approximately 25 years old," the paramedic yelled, jogging alongside the gurney. "Found unresponsive side of the highway, GCS of 9. Oh, and she's in active labor. Crowning." Seraphiel's head snapped up. All the exhaustion evaporated, replaced by pure, uncut adrenaline. "To trauma 3, now page OB." The woman on the gurney was a ghost. Her face was pale and bruised, her dark hair matted with rain, and something that looked suspiciously like mud. She was wearing a simple torn cotton dress soaked through. She was shivering, but her eyes, when they fluttered open, were furnaces of pain. "Sweetheart, my name is Seraphiel. We're at St. Jude's. You're having a baby. We're going to take care of you." Seraphiel said, her voice dropping into that practiced, calm cadence. The delivery was brutal and fast. There was no time for epidurals, no time for soothing music. It was a raw, primal event in a room filled with beeping machines and the sterile smell of iodine. The woman Ariana, as they'd later learn her name, would scream, and then her body would go limp, her consciousness flickering. "Vitals are dropping," the OB, Dr. Ramirez, shouted. "She's hemorrhaging. We're losing her. Bear down, honey, one more push. For your baby. One more." Seraphiel coached her hand, gripping the woman's, with a final agonizing cry that seemed to rip from her very soul. The baby was born. A boy. He was small, covered in vernix and blood, and terrifyingly silent. "No cry," Seraphiel whispered, her heart seizing. Dr. Ramirez, a miracle worker in scrubs, began neonatal resuscitation. 1 second. 2. 3. And then a sound that cut through the storm like a beacon, a thin, reedy wail. "He's okay." Seraphiel breathed, tears stinging her eyes as she turned back to the mother. "You did it. He's here. He's beautiful." Ariana's eyes glazed with a pain that went beyond the physical, focused on Seraphiel. "He's safe," she rasped. "He's safe," Seraphiel promised. It was right then that the man burst through the doors. He was drenched, his brown hair plastered to his skull, his eyes wild with a terror that matched the woman's. He looked like he'd run a marathon through the storm. "Ariana!" he screamed, rushing to the gurney. "Oh God, Ariana! Sir, you can't be in here!" A resident tried to block him. "That's my wife," he sobbed, grabbing Ariana's limp hand. "Ariana, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Dr. Ramirez looked at Serafiel. The room was a mess of blood and medical supplies. "Get him out. We have to stabilize her. Now." "Sir," Serafiel said, touching his arm gently. "She's very sick. We need to get her to surgery. Please wait outside. You can see your baby in a moment." No, I can't leave her," he wept. But Ariana's eyes were already closing. Her vitals were cratering. "Code Blue!" Dr. Ramirez shouted. The man was ushered out, collapsing into a chair in the hallway, his head in his hands, his body racked with sobs. Serafiel and the team worked frantically, but the storm inside Ariana's body was worse than the one outside. Her injuries from whatever had happened, combined with the trauma of childbirth, were too much. They lost her. 1 hour later, Serafiel Jenkins had to do the worst part of her job. She cleaned Ariana's face, placed a clean blanket over her, and walked out to the hallway to tell a brand new father that he was now a single parent. The hallway felt a mile long. The man was still there, a statue of grief. He hadn't moved. He looked up as Serafiel approached, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He already knew. We did everything we could," Serafiel said, her voice breaking. It never got easier. "The internal bleeding. It was too severe. I am so sorry." The man didn't make a sound. He just folded in on himself, a silent, agonizing implosion of grief. Serafiel sat beside him, a hand on his shoulder, and waited. The only sounds were the distant buzz of the hospital and the man's shattered breathing. "The baby," he finally choked out, his voice raw. "Is he? He's beautiful," Serafiel said, managing a small, sad smile. "A little small, but his lungs are strong. He's in the NICU just for observation. He's a fighter, like his mom." This brought a fresh wave of sobs. "She was," he whispered. "She was the strongest person I've ever known." "I was with her, at the end," Serafiel said softly. "She wasn't alone." Did she say anything?" he asked, looking up his face, desperate for one last piece of her. Serafiel's heart ached. She thought of the chaotic delivery, the fear, and then the brief, sacred moment after. She had taken the call to stop resuscitation and had returned to the room to find it empty, save for Ariana. The team had rushed the baby to the NICU, and Ariana's body was being prepped for the morgue. But as Serafiel had smoothed her hair, Ariana's eyes had fluttered open one last time. A terminal lucidity that happened sometimes, a final flare of the candle. Ariana had looked right at Serafiel. Her lips moved. Serafiel had to lean in her ear just inches from Ariana's mouth, the smell of sterile sheets and iron in her nose. "Orion?" Ariana had whispered. "His name is Orion." And then she was gone. Truly gone. Serafiel related this to the man. She wanted his name to be Orion. She whispered it. It was her last word. The man's face crumpled in a way that was both beautiful and terrible. "Orion," he repeated. "Of course. She always loved that name. She said it was a strong name, a hunter." "It's a beautiful name," Serafiel agreed. "Your son is officially Baby Boy Orion." She stood up, switching painfully back to her professional role. "Sir, I hate to ask this right now, but we have to do the paperwork for the birth certificate and for his mother." She pulled out the clipboard with the standard forms. "I'll need her full name, and I'll need to see your ID." "Her name was Ariana Hayes," he said, his voice distant. "Ariana Jean Hayes." "Thank you." Seraphiel wrote it down. The man fumbled in the pocket of his soaked jeans. He pulled out a worn brown leather wallet. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely retrieve the card. He finally pulled out a driver's license and handed it to her, his eyes focused on the floor. Seraphiel took it. She glanced down her pen, poised over the father's name section of the form. Her breath hitched. It wasn't a gasp. It was a complete stop. The air in her lungs turned to ice. The hallway, the man, the grief, it all dissolved, replaced by a roaring in her ears. She looked at the photo. It was him a bit younger, smiling slightly. She looked at the name, looked at the Mark Orion Davenport. 1280, Sycamore Heights, DOB, 14-1990. Seraphiel's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sound that tried to escape. It came out anyway, a choked, horrified gasp. The man looked up, his grief-stricken face clouding with confusion. "Nurse, are you okay?" Seraphiel couldn't speak. She just stared at the card. Mark Orion Davenport. A name she hadn't seen in print in 10 years. A name that was seared into her memory. A name that belonged to the man who had killed her sister. 10 years ago. Seraphiel Jenkins wasn't a charge nurse. She was a recent nursing graduate full of hope, planning a wedding. Her world was bright, and her biggest worry was which color to choose for the bridesmaid dresses. Her younger sister Emily was her maid of honor. Emily was 21. She was the bright one, the artist, the free spirit. She was studying art history and had a laugh that could and often did fill an entire house. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a clear Tuesday. Seraphiel and her fiancé, a man she could hardly remember now, were asleep. It was the hospital. Not her hospital, but the city general. "There's been an accident," a monotone voice had said. "A hit and run." The world tilted. The bright colors of her life turned to gray. Emily had been walking home from a late study session at the campus library. A witness, a homeless man named Terry, said a dark blue high-end sports car, a Bentley, he thought had mounted the curb. It was going like a bat out of hell. It struck Emily, sending her flying, and never even tapped the brakes. Emily was alive just barely when Seraphiel got there. She died 3 hours later, holding Seraphiel's hand. The police investigation was a masterclass in frustration. The witness was unreliable. The CCTV footage was grainy, but there was a lead, a partial plate, and the witness's description of the driver, a young kid rich-looking, laughing. The car was traced. It was registered to Davenport Industries, a sprawling real estate and logistics empire. The man who often drove it, the heir to the fortune Mark Orion Davenport. He was 20 at the time. A notorious playboy, all slicked back hair and smug grins in the society pages. His name was whispered in connection with trashed hotel rooms DUIs that disappeared and women who signed NDAs. The Davenport family lawyers descended like vultures. They produced an alibi. Mark was at a private party in the Hamptons. They produced flight manifests. They produced a dozen witnesses who swore he was nowhere near the city. The homeless witness Terry suddenly recanted his testimony, his eyes vacant. He was arrested for public intoxication 2 days later and vanished from the narrative. The case went cold in less than 48 hours. There was no justice. There was just a 21-year-old girl in a grave and a family that got away with murder. Seraphiel's engagement fell apart. The bright colors never fully returned. She threw herself into her work, the grief hardening into a cold, quiet rage that she buried under layers of professional compassion. She was a good nurse. She was a healer. But she had never ever forgotten the name. Mark Orion Davenport. And now a man claiming to be him was sitting in her hallway holding a fake leather wallet, grieving for a woman who had just whispered that name with her dying breath. "Nurse Jenkins Seraphiel." The man's voice snapped her back. He was standing his face a mask of concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Seraphiel's training kicked in a firewall against the panic. She forced her lungs to work. I'm sorry," she stammered, handing the ID back. Her hand was shaking violently. "It's a long night. The name, it's unusual." "Yeah," he said, pocketing the wallet, his gaze dropping. "Orion. It was my great-grandfather's name. Ariana loved it. A connection." Seraphiel stared at him. This was the monster from her nightmares. This broken, sobbing man in damp, inexpensive jeans and a faded t-shirt. This was the rich kid in the Bentley. It didn't make sense. The man in the papers 10 years ago was sharp, arrogant, with cold eyes. This man looked soft. Beaten down by life, not insulated by wealth. His face was kind. But the ID, the name, the baby... Orion. "I need to," Seraphiel said, pointing vaguely down the hall. "I need to check on the baby, on Orion. I'll be right back." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked her legs stiff to the staff bathroom. She locked the door, leaned over the sink, and was violently, horrifyingly sick. The man who killed her sister was in her hospital, and she was the nurse assigned to care for his newborn son. Seraphiel splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. Her eyes were wide haunted. "This is a hospital. You are a professional. He is a patient. That baby is a patient." The mantra repeated in her head, but it was drowned out by a different, darker voice. "He's a murderer. He's a monster. He killed Emily." She took a deep, shuddering breath. She had to separate the man from the file. The man sitting in her hallway was a grieving widower. The man in her memory was a sociopath. Could they be the same person? He looked older than 30. The ID's DOB would make him 35. Grief and stress could do that. The Davenport from the papers would be 30 now. No, wait. Mark was 20 10 years ago. He'd be 30. The ID said 35. A discrepancy. A tiny crack in the story. Seraphiel clung to it. She composed herself, smoothing her scrubs, and walked back out. He was still there, but now he was standing, looking through the nursery window at the rows of bassinets. "He's in the specialized unit," Seraphiel said, her voice flat, devoid of its earlier warmth. "The NICU is just down this hall. You can see him." She led him, the silence between them thick and heavy. She watched him. The way he walked, the way he held his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't walk like a man who owned the world. He walked like a man who was carrying it. They arrived at the neonatal intensive care unit. A different nurse, a younger woman named Chloe, was monitoring the isolettes. In the first one, hooked up to a tiny heart monitor, was baby boy Orion. The man's reaction was instantaneous. He pressed his hand to the glass, a sob catching in his throat. He's so small. He's 5 pounds 4 ounces, Seraphiel said, reading the chart. His APGAR scores were low at first, but he's stabilizing. He's breathing on his own. He's strong. Like his mom, the man whispered again. He turned to Seraphiel, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Can I hold him? For a little while, Seraphiel said. She and Chloe guided him through the scrubbing-in process. He washed his hands meticulously, his brow furrowed in concentration. They placed the swaddled baby in his arms. The man sat in the rocking chair, his large, calloused hands calloused, Seraphiel noted. Not the hands of a billionaire playboy cradling the tiny bundle. He wept, rocking the baby gently, whispering to him, Hey, Orion. Hey, little man. It's your dad. I'm your dad. And I'm so sorry, your mom. She loved you so much. She loved you more than anything. She was so brave. You're going to be brave too. I'm going to protect you, I promise. I swear, Ariana, I will protect him. Seraphiel watched her insides twisting. This was not the performance of a monster. This was raw, unfiltered, devastating love. This was the purest grief she had ever witnessed. Her certainty began to crumble. But the name, the ID, the whisper, it couldn't be a coincidence. Mr. Davenport, she said. The name tasted like ash in her mouth. He flinched. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but she saw it. He flinched at his own name. Yes, he said, not looking up from the baby. We need to talk about Ariana, Seraphiel said, choosing her words carefully. She had some bruising, some injuries that didn't seem to be from a simple, well, we don't know what happened. The paramedics said side of the highway. Was there a car accident? He went very still. The rocking stopped. Yes, he said, his voice tight. A car accident. We were run off the road. The storm. A truck. It didn't see us. Did you file a police report? There was no time. He snapped his head, coming up. His eyes weren't kind anymore. They were flashing with fear. I had to get her here. I flagged someone down. My phone was lost. Broken. We'll need to call them, Seraphiel said. It's standard procedure for a DOA with traumatic injuries. No, he said too loud. Baby Orion startled, his tiny face screwing up. Shh. The man soothed, his voice dropping. Please, he whispered to Seraphiel. Not yet. Can't it wait? I just lost her. I can't deal with forms, with cops. It's the law, sir, Seraphiel said, her suspicion returning cold and hard. Unless there's a reason you don't want to talk to the police. He looked at her, his face a battleground of panic and sorrow. You don't understand. No, Seraphiel said, her voice hardening. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand how a man whose family owns half the city ends up in a rainstorm on the side of a highway with his dying wife. I don't understand the ID, and I don't understand the name. What about the ID? It says you're 35. Mark Davenport, the one I've read about, the one who everyone knows. He'd be 30, maybe 31. His face went white. He'd been caught. He stammered. Who are you? Seraphiel demanded, her voice a low, fierce whisper, conscious of the other babies in the room. The man looked down at the baby in his arms, a look of utter defeat on his face. My name, he said, his voice cracking, is Thomas. Thomas Vance. I'm a high school history teacher. Or, I was. Then who is Mark Orion Davenport? Seraphiel pressed her heart, hammering. He's the man, Thomas Vance said, looking up, his eyes filled with a terror so profound it chilled Seraphiel to the bone. "He's the man who's trying to kill us." The world stopped spinning, and then resumed, but on a different axis. "What do you mean?" Seraphiel asked, her mind struggling to catch up. "That ID, it's a fake." "It's real," Thomas said bitterly. "It's just not mine. I stole it from one of his associates. I kept it for an emergency. When we got here and you asked for ID, I panicked. I thought using his name, his real name. I don't know what I thought. That it would shield us. That it would be so audacious no one would question it." "Why?" Seraphiel said. "Why were you running from Mark Davenport?" It was at that moment that Dr. Peterson, the hospital's senior administrator, walked past the NICU. He was doing his nightly rounds, a habit he'd kept for 30 years. He was a man who knew every donor, every board member, and every major family in the city. He glanced in, saw the new father, and did a double take. He stepped into the NICU. Thomas Vance. "Is that you?" Thomas looked up, his face ashen. "Dr. Peterson, hello?" "My goodness," the doctor said, his eyes going to the baby, and then to Thomas's disheveled state. "I heard about a Jane Doe. I had no idea it was Ariana. I am so deeply sorry. I knew her from the benefit. A lovely woman." Seraphiel was reeling. You know him, both of them." "Of course," Dr. Peterson said, looking confused. "Thomas here taught my youngest daughter Sophie at preparatory school. And Ariana Hayes, was Mark Davenport's executive assistant for years. A brilliant woman. She ran his entire life." The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture far more sinister than Seraphiel could have imagined. "Dr. Peterson," Seraphiel said, her voice urgent. "We need to go to your office, now, and we need security." "Security, what on earth for?" "Because," Seraphiel said, looking at Thomas, who was nodding, his eyes wide with fear, "the man Ariana was running from, the real Mark Davenport, he's the one who ran them off the road, and he's not going to stop looking for them, or for the baby." Dr. Peterson's face hardened. He was an administrator, but he'd been an army surgeon first. He understood threats. "Chloe," he said to the other nurse, "lock down this unit. No one in or out without my or Nurse Jenkins's direct authorization. Understood?" "Yes, doctor." "Thomas, Seraphiel, my office. Now." They moved quickly. Thomas reluctantly handed Orion to Chloe, his hands shaking. "You'll keep him safe." "With my life," the young nurse said, her eyes firm. In the polished mahogany office, with the storm still raging outside, the story, finally, terribly came out. "I met Ariana 2 years ago," Thomas began. His hands steepled in front of his face. "I was tutoring Mark Davenport's younger cousin, a kid named Alex. Ariana, she was always there, in the background, managing the schedules, booking the jets, handling the problems. She was smart, funny, and utterly trapped. Davenport was obsessed with her." Thomas continued, his voice thick with disgust. "Not in a romantic way, not really. In a possessive way. Like she was his favorite painting. He controlled every aspect of her life. What she wore, where she went. She had a company car, a company apartment. It was a gilded cage." "And you fell in love," Seraphiel finished. "We were careful," Thomas said. "So careful. Secret lunches. Stolen conversations in the library. We were saving. We were planning to get out, to just disappear. Go to Oregon, maybe. Start over. I'd teach she wanted to open a flower shop." He choked on a sob. Then she found out she was pregnant. We were terrified, but happy. It was the push we needed. We set a date, last night. But Davenport found out, Seraphiel asked. Worse. Ariana found out about him. She was an indispensable, so she had access to everything. His private servers, his offshore accounts. She wasn't just his assistant. She was his everything. And she stumbled onto the truth. He's not just a spoiled rich man, Nurse Jenkins. He's a criminal, a monster. What did she find? Dr. Peterson asked, his face grim. Everything, Thomas said, his voice dropping. Money laundering, human trafficking, and an old encrypted file labeled EJ Cold Case. She opened it. It was a file on a hit and run from 10 years ago. A girl named Emily Jenkins. He had files, payouts to a witness, a fake flight manifest, a recording. He was bragging about it. Seraphiel's blood ran cold. She gripped the edge of the desk. Emily. Jenkins. Thomas looked at her, his eyes widening in dawning horror. Oh my God. Your name. Jenkins. Seraphiel Jenkins. You're her sister. He bragged about it. Seraphiel's voice was a dead, hollow thing. He was on a call with his lawyer, drunk, Thomas whispered. He said, the bitch ran out. I barely even felt it. Cost me more to clean the car than to buy the witness. Ariana, she copied everything. A ledger, the recording. Everything. She put it on a secure flash drive. That's what he's after. Not just her. Not just me. The drive. Where is it? Dr. Peterson demanded. She had it. Thomas said, his face crumbling. It was in her purse. When they ran us off the road, a black SUV, it must be lost. Or they have it. No, Seraphiel said. Her mind was racing. No. The paramedics, they brought in her belongings. A purse. It's in the ER. In a clear plastic bag in the property locker. I saw them log it. A new, terrible urgency filled the room. If Davenport's men knew she was here, they wouldn't just be looking for a baby. They'd be looking for that drive, as if summoned. Dr. Peterson's desk phone buzzed. He picked it up. This is Peterson. He listened, his face turning to granite. Doctor, his head of security said on the line, we have a situation at the ER entrance. 2 gentlemen. They're not police, but they're flashing badges. They're asking for the belongings of a Jane Doe named Ariana Hayes. They say they're federal agents. Seraphiel and Thomas locked eyes. They're here. Stall them, Dr. Peterson said into the phone, his voice pure command. Tell them you need to verify their credentials with the regional office, and that all patient property is under administrative lock due to the storm. Do not let them past the lobby. I'm on my way. He hung up. Seraphiel, go to the ER. Get that drive. Use the staff corridors. Do not be seen. Thomas, you stay here. Lock this door. Do not open it for anyone but me. No, Thomas said, standing up. I'm not hiding. Ariana, she died for that. I'm coming with you. You're a civilian, Dr. Peterson argued. He's the only other person who knows what to look for. Seraphiel said, her mind sharp, clinical. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, protective fury. He comes. We move faster together. Dr. Peterson nodded grimly. Fine. But you do exactly as I say. The hospital Seraphiel knew the place of healing, of quiet routine, had transformed. The staff corridors, usually empty, save for a rolling linen cart, now felt like the walls of a besieged castle. Every sound, every distant ding of an elevator made them jump. The ER property locker is just past the ambulance bay, Seraphiel whispered, leading Thomas through a maze of staff-only doors. It's key-coded. I have the master. They looked like him, Thomas whispered, his voice shaking as they half-jogged down a long, sterile hallway. The men who ran us off the road. The federal agents. They were in the black SUV. I saw their faces when I crawled out of the ditch to get to Ariana." "They won't get it," Seraphiel said, her voice a low growl. The image of her sister Emily was superimposed over her vision. The justice she had been denied for a decade was suddenly impossibly within reach. It was locked in a plastic box 20 feet away. They reached the small, windowless office where patient belongings were kept. Seraphiel swiped her badge and entered the code. The door clicked open. Her name was logged as Jane Doe, time of arrival. Seraphiel scanned the logbook. "Here, 2147, locker 14B. She opened the metal locker. Inside was a single clear plastic bag. It held a soaked, muddy brown purse, a single flat shoe, and a cracked cell phone. Thomas's hands dove into the bag, pulling out the purse. He unzipped the main compartment. "It's not here, not here." He tore through the pockets, his panic rising. "Lipstick keys. Ariana, where did you put it?" "Think, Thomas," Seraphiel urged, keeping her eye on the door. "Was it hidden? A secret pocket?" "Yes," he said, a surge of adrenaline hitting him. "Yes. The lining. She ripped a small hole in the lining of the main compartment and slipped it inside." His fingers frantically felt along the inside of the silk lining. "Got it!" he exclaimed, pulling out a tiny silver flash drive. It was no bigger than his thumbnail. "Okay," Seraphiel breathed, taking it from him. "Now we get back to Peterson's office." She pocketed the drive. As they turned to leave, the door to the office burst open. It wasn't Dr. Peterson. Two men stood there. They were tall, impeccably dressed in dark suits that were only slightly damp from the rain. They looked like lawyers or bankers, except for the hard, dead look in their eyes. The federal agents. "We'll take that," the taller one said. His voice was calm, pleasant, and utterly menacing. "And you," he said, looking at Thomas. "Mr. Davenport is very, very disappointed in you, and in Ariana. He's a man who values loyalty above all else." You killed her," Thomas choked out, half grief, half rage. "She was a liability, and she stole something. Now give it to me," the man said, taking a step into the room. He didn't seem to care about Seraphiel at all. She was just a nurse. "No," Seraphiel said. The man sighed, annoyed. He looked at his partner. "Michael, check the woman. She's the one who opened the locker." The second man, Michael, moved toward Seraphiel. Seraphiel reacted on pure instinct. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a nurse. She knew the human body. As Michael reached for her, she grabbed the heavy-duty stapler from the desk and swung it hard into the side of his neck, right on the carotid artery. He grunted, surprised, and staggered back. "Thomas, run!" Seraphiel screamed, shoving him out the door. They bolted back into the staff corridor. Behind them, they heard the heavy pounding footsteps of the two men. "This way!" Seraphiel yelled, grabbing Thomas's arm. "The surgical wing! We can get to the elevators, go up to the NICU!" "No!" Thomas panted. "The NICU is the first place they'll look. They want the baby too. He's leverage, or a loose end." He was right. "Okay," Seraphiel said, her mind racing. "The chapel. It's public, it's open, and it has another exit." They changed direction, bursting through a set of double doors into the main atrium. It was 4 a.m. The atrium was empty, save for a lone janitor mopping the floor. They ran across the polished marble, their sneakers squeaking. "There," Thomas pointed. The small, unassuming door of the interfaith chapel. They ducked inside, sliding into a back pew. The room was dark, lit only by a single soft spotlight on a simple altar. It smelled of old wood and floor wax. "What now?" Thomas whispered, his body trembling. "We call the real police," Seraphiel said, pulling out her personal cell phone. She had the flash drive in her other hand, her grip so tight her knuckles were white. Her fingers were dialing 911 when the chapel doors opened again. The tall man stood silhouetted in the doorway. "This is predictable," he said, his voice echoing in the small, quiet space. "The sanctuary. Very dramatic." He stepped inside his partner, Michael, blocking the exit. "The drive nurse," the tall man said. "I don't know who you are or why you're involved, but this is your one and only chance to walk away. Give me the drive and you can go back to whatever it is you do. Changing bedpans." Seraphiel looked at Thomas. He was pale, defeated. She looked at the flash drive in her hand. "Cost me more to clean the car than to buy the witness." Emily's face flashed in her mind. "No," Seraphiel said. She stood up. Her voice didn't shake. "I know what's on this drive, and I know who you are. You're Mark Davenport's fixers. You're the men who murdered Ariana Hayes." "That was an accident," the man said with a shrug. "This," he said, taking a step toward her, "this will be on purpose. And I know," Seraphiel continued, her voice rising, "that 10 years ago your boss murdered my sister, Emily Jenkins. He hit her with his car and he bragged about it." The tall man's professional calm finally broke. His eyes widened. This was a complication he hadn't expected. "That Jenkins," he said, a flicker of, was it fear, crossing his face. "I am," Seraphiel said, "and you're not getting this drive." The man, Michael, lunged, but Thomas, the quiet history teacher, moved first. He tackled the man at the knees, a surprisingly brutal football tackle. They crashed into the pews, wood splintering. The tall man pulled something from his jacket. It wasn't a gun. It was a syringe. "I really hoped not to make a mess." He sighed. Seraphiel didn't wait. She turned and ran not for the blocked main door, but for the small, unassuming door behind the altar. The one marked, "Clergy Only." She burst through it into a small office. The tall man was right behind her. She fumbled with the lock on the far door. It was stuck. "It's over, nurse," he said, advancing on her. "You're right," Seraphiel said. She looked at the flash drive. She looked at the man. And she looked at the heavy brass cross on the chaplain's desk. She did the only thing she could. She put the flash drive in her mouth and swallowed it. The man stopped. He stared at her, his jaw dropping in disbelief. You didn't." "I did," Seraphiel choked out, her throat burning. "So now what you're going to, what cut me open right here in the hospital?" The man's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He raised the syringe. "I wouldn't," a new voice said. Dr. Peterson was standing in the doorway Seraphiel had just come through. Behind him were 2 uniformed police officers, their guns drawn. Thomas was with them, bruised but standing. "Put the needle down, sir," one of the officers said. "And you," he said to the other man who was just emerging from the chapel, "hands where I can see them." The tall man looked at the police, at Seraphiel, at the useless syringe in his hand. His multi-million-dollar-a-year career of fixing problems was over. He slowly, carefully placed the syringe on the desk. "I'm going to need a lawyer," he said. "You're going to need a lot more than that," Seraphiel Jenkins said, her voice shaking with relief. The fluorescent lights of the hospital's administrative wing felt harsh, an unwelcome buzzing reality after the pre-dawn shadows of the chapel. The storm outside had finally exhausted itself, leaving a pre-dawn stillness that was almost more unsettling than the rain. Seraphiel Thomas and Dr. Peterson sat in a sterile conference room, the air thick with the smell of bitter coffee and the metallic tang of adrenaline. Opposite them sat Detective Alani Caldas. She was a woman who looked as though she hadn't slept in a week, but hadn't missed a single detail in her entire career. Her pen was poised, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "Let me get this straight, Nurse Jenkins," Caldas said, her voice a low, gravelly monotone. "You swallowed the evidence. A flash drive." "It seemed like the only option," Seraphiel said. Her throat was raw, and she felt a strange, dull ache in her abdomen. "He was going to take it. He had a syringe. I reacted." Thomas, his hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup, just stared into the middle distance. "She saved my life. She saved Ariana's legacy. And you," Caldas said, turning to Thomas, "are Thomas Vance, high school history teacher. But the ID you gave Nurse Jenkins, the ID that started this, belonged to Mark Orion Davenport." "It wasn't his," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking. "It was a fake. I stole it. From one of his fixers months ago. It was part of our escape plan. An emergency ID. When I got here and Ariana was gone, and the nurse asked, I just grabbed it. I don't know what I thought. That his name was a shield, maybe. That it was so powerful it would protect us." He let out a harsh, dry sob. "It was his name that was hunting us." Detective Caldas's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Mr. Vance, what Ariana Hayes did, it was beyond brave. She was terrified," Thomas said, his gaze finding Seraphiel's. "She found the file. The one about your sister, Emily. She cried for an hour. She kept saying, he didn't just kill her, Thomas. He erased her. She knew he'd do the same to us. To our baby. The other files, the trafficking, the laundering, that was just evil. But Emily's file, that was personal. She knew that was the one he would kill to keep hidden." Caldas's pen stopped. She looked up, her professional mask slipping. "Jenkins. Emily Jenkins. The 2014 hit and run. Sycamore Heights. She was my sister." Seraphiel said the words heavy and solid. Caldas leaned back, letting out a long, slow breath. "I was a rookie," she said, her voice dropping. "I was on patrol that night. We all knew. We knew it was Davenport, the witness who recanted the ironclad alibi that appeared 12 hours later. The case was suffocated. In 48 hours, it went from a slam dunk to a cold case. We've been waiting 10 years, nurse. 10 years for a thread. And you just swallowed it." A sharp knock on the door interrupted them. A man in a crisp, dark suit, a suit far too expensive for a local cop, entered flashing a badge. "Detective Caldas, Agent Rigsby, FBI. This conference room is now a federal operation. We're taking lead." A new chill entered the room. This was it. The escalation. "You're taking lead on my DOA," Caldas asked, her eyes narrowing. "We're taking lead on Mark Orion Davenport." Rigsby corrected, his gaze sweeping over Seraphiel and Thomas. "The men you have in custody, Camden and Shaw, are on our watch list. They're not just fixers. They're professional cleaners for a multinational criminal enterprise. Your DOA detective just blew the lid off it." He turned to Thomas. "Mr. Vance, the drive your wife secured, we believe it contains the ledgers for his entire human trafficking operation." The words hung in the air, heavy and grotesque. "And," Seraphiel added, her voice clear, "it has a recording of him bragging about murdering my sister." Rigsby's focus snapped to her. "We heard. That's the key. The trafficking charges are complex. But a confession to a state-level murder, that's the anchor. It proves he's not just a white-collar criminal. He's a violent, hands-on sociopath. It makes him a flight risk. It denies him bail." As if on cue, Rigsby's phone buzzed. He answered it. "Rigsby? Yes, yes. He's where on the lawn, understood. Take him." He hung up, a grim, thin smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, they got him. Mark Orion Davenport was apprehended 10 minutes ago at his Sycamore Heights estate. He was in his silk pajamas attempting to board his private helicopter with a briefcase full of cash and a fake passport." He looked directly at Thomas, then at Seraphiel. "It's over. He's in custody." Thomas didn't cheer. He just deflated. The tension that had held his body rigid for months, for years, finally evaporated, leaving him a hollowed-out man. He bent over his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook with the silent, racking sobs of a man who had just survived the unsurvivable, only to realize what it had cost him. Seraphiel, her hand on his back, felt a profound, shuddering relief. It wasn't joy. It was the release of a 10-year-old anchor. The monster from her nightmares, the ghost that had haunted her family, was in a cage. "He's caught Emily," she thought, tears streaming down her own face. "He's finally caught." The sun was high by the time Seraphiel finished. The hospital was in full swing, the day shift having taken over, blissfully unaware of the siege that had taken place in the night's darkest hours. Seraphiel had been debriefed, examined the drive was in process, and finally mercifully released from the conference room. She was bone-tired, every muscle aching, but she didn't go home. She walked as if pulled by an invisible string back to the NICU. The light inside was different. The harsh, artificial glow of the night was gone, replaced by soft, indirect morning light filtering in from the hallway. And in the corner, in the same rocking chair, sat Thomas. He was clean. Chloe, the night nurse who had just clocked out, had found him a set of spare scrubs. His hair was damp, as if he'd splashed water on his face, and in his arms no longer in an isolette, but swaddled in a simple white blanket, was his son. He looked up as Seraphiel entered, and his eyes, though red-rimmed and hollowed by grief, held a new fragile light. They let me hold him," he whispered. "Chloe showed me how to hold his head." Seraphiel sat in the chair beside him. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the gentle, rhythmic beep of the monitors and the quiet whoosh of the ventilator for another sicker baby nearby. "He needs a name," Thomas said, his voice thick. "For the certificate. The real one." "He has one," Seraphiel said softly. "Ariana gave him one." Thomas winced. His face tightened. "Orion, I can't, Seraphiel. I can't. Every time I look at him, every time I say his name, I'll see him. Mark Orion Davenport, the man who took her." He looked down at the tiny, perfect face. "How can I curse my son with that name, the name of his mother's murderer?" He was right. The name was poison. Seraphiel felt it too. For a decade, Orion had been a curse she whispered in the dark. It was the name of arrogance, of injustice, of the man who laughed about cleaning his car. I hated that name. Seraphiel said, her voice quiet but fierce. I hated it more than any other word in the English language. It was the name of the man who stole my sister. For 10 years, I've prayed for that name to be synonymous with justice, for it to be on a prison docket, a gravestone. She looked at the baby sleeping, his tiny hand curled around Thomas's finger. But Ariana was so smart. Seraphiel continued, a new understanding dawning on her. Don't you see Thomas? She wasn't naming him after Davenport. She was reclaiming it. She was taking the one thing that monster valued, his legacy, his very name, and she was giving it to her son. She wasn't passing on a curse. She was breaking it. Thomas looked up, his eyes searching hers, desperate to believe. In the myths, Seraphiel said, the old stories coming back to her, Orion isn't a villain. He's a hunter, a hero. He was placed in the stars by the gods, a giant, brilliant constellation that watches over the winter sky. He's a protector, a beacon, a guide. She reached out her finger, gently tracing the baby's brow. Mark Davenport. His name is going to be forgotten. It'll be a footnote in a true crime story. He'll be a disgraced monster. But this is Orion. He's not the shadow. He's the light. Ariana knew. She was naming him for the man who will hunt the stars, not the man who hunted her. She looked at Thomas, her gaze intense. She wasn't just giving him a name, Thomas. She was giving him his first mission, to live, to be good, to be everything that man was not. He's not Mark's legacy. He's Ariana's. He's Orion Thomas Vance. And that, she said, a small, watery smile touching her lips, is a much, much better story. Thomas stared at his son, the conflict on his face slowly dissolving, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking wave of love. He bent his head, his lips touching the baby's soft hair. Orion, he whispered. Orion Thomas Vance. Hello, Orion. He looked at Seraphiel, and his eyes were clear for the first time. Thank you for giving him back his name. For, my God, Seraphiel, for everything. For Emily. We'll have to testify, Seraphiel said, her voice practical, but her hand was still on the baby's blanket. It's going to be a circus. The trials. The media. I know, Thomas said, his grip on his son tightening. I have to raise him through all of that. Alone. No, Seraphiel said, meeting his gaze. You're not alone in this, Thomas. You and I, we're the only two people in the world who really know what happened in that hospital tonight. We're bound to this. We're bound to him. A new family forged not by blood, but by trauma and survival, and a shared duty to the future and to the past. Seraphiel Jenkins finally stood up. She was exhausted. She was grieving. Her throat hurt. But as she looked at Orion Thomas Vance, she realized the cold, hard knot of rage she had carried inside her for 10 years was at last gone. She was a nurse. She was a sister. And she was finally at peace. She walked out of the NICU, past the worried families and the quiet, beeping machines. She pushed open the main hospital doors, and for the first time in a decade, the morning sun didn't just feel bright. It felt warm. The story of Seraphiel Thomas and baby Orion is a powerful reminder that heroes are not always the ones with capes. Sometimes they're the ones in scrubs. They are the quiet, everyday people who, when faced with unimaginable darkness, find the courage to stand up and fight. It's a story about how one person's bravery, Ariana's, can start a chain reaction that topples an empire and brings a decade of injustice to an end. The name Orion, once a symbol of hate and corruption, was reclaimed and given to a new life, a symbol of hope. Justice, like a baby, can be a long and painful delivery, but the moment it arrives, it changes the world. What did you think of Seraphiel's bravery? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage can be found in the most unexpected places. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true-life stories that will leave you breathless. We'll see you in the next one.